and welcome to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany Needham
and Laurie Casagrande.
And each week, we get to share with you stories from women of all ages and stages of life who are following Jesus right where they're at.
Our prayer is that each story encourages you to run your race in your place.
In today's episode, I get to introduce you to Alicia Vitello. Ali and I go way, way back to when she was probably about 13 and I was probably about 16. And she was dating my husband's friend. I was dating my now husband. And we just have so many weird but funny connections from camp to church to all sorts of things. And Ali is someone that I have just been able to appreciate for a season pretty close by as we attended the same church as them. But for a long time, it's been from a distance as her and her husband have served so faithfully in New Hampshire. And every time that I've gotten the chance to have a conversation or connect with Ali, I just leave so encouraged. And she has this incredible gift of not just encouragement, but I would say having seen her teach at our conference, Simply Beautiful, to the young women, just really inspiring them to chase after God, to go deeper into His Word. It's just, there is a sweetness about her that I know is going to come across in this. And if you ever get to meet her, I'm sure you'll get to experience. But before we get to the interview, Laurie, if you could choose one word to describe Ali to our listeners, what would you choose?
I'm going to do you one better. There's 3 words. Humble, faithful follower. Ali is a sweetheart, like you mentioned. Thank you so much for introducing us to your beautiful friend, Bethany. Without further ado, here's Ali Vitello.
Okay, ladies, I am here with my friend, Alicia Vitello, and very excited to get the opportunity to share her story with you. So, Ali, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel privileged that you asked. It's great.
Well, I'm honored that you said yes. So for everyone that I'm able, I usually like to at least give some connection, like how do I know you or do I even know you, which is becoming actually important because a lot of guests now I'm like, I really didn't know this person before we saw each other face to face. But that is not true of you because we go pretty far back, actually. I have honestly just really sweet, adorable memories of tiny little Ali when you were dating your now husband at Monadnock Bible Conference, and your husband and my husband were in youth group together. His father was my husband's youth pastor, and I mean, just to kind of show the impact there, on our wedding day, it was your now father-in-law and husband were both groomsmen in my husband and I's wedding. That's so crazy to think about. I'm like, I'm having moments.
Feels like ages ago, I think, that, I don't know, we were all so young, I guess, but.
I guess we should probably own it. It was ages ago. It was a long time ago. Gosh, just so many sweet memories. And Ali, honestly, I have just really loved, even though we have not stayed local to one another, obviously Andy and I moved out to Massachusetts and you and your husband are still in New Hampshire. I've just been so blessed and encouraged whenever I see updates about you guys and where you're at and just how faithful you have been in serving in your church community and the community around you. And so, honestly, you have been on my list of people to reach out to be on this podcast since season 1. So, yeah, so you're kind of a big deal. But for those who don't have the pleasure of knowing you face to face, could you take some time and just kind of unpack your story for us? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was born in New Hampshire, but I grew up in central Massachusetts, and that's where most of my childhood was. My parents are Christian. I grew up in a Christian family, and I've got 2 biological sisters and 2 brothers that were adopted. And we grew up in Gardner, Massachusetts. I was homeschooled for a good portion of my life, most of grade school and then middle school. And I decided that in high school, that's when I would go back to public school. My parents gave us the option to do that. So
in high school?
Yeah. And we knew we were really connected with our community because we did sports and music and stuff like that. And so it really kind of was easy going back to school. There were familiar faces there and kind of just fit right in, I think. I mean, I remember it being scary because, all you knew was your family at that point. And then getting back into school was, adapting. You had to adapt to certain things and a real schedule and stuff like that. So, but I did graduate from Gardner High School. And it's funny because this is kind of where I met Jared, my husband. We were really young when we met each other, actually. I was 11 years old. I always think it's funny because his cousin, Angela, she was the one her and I went to church together in Gardner. And I remember her one day asking me and my sister if we went. She's like, my uncle does this youth group up in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. Do you guys want to come with me sometime? And we were like, yeah, sure. Sounds cool. So it's funny that his cousin was the person who introduced us. So we went with her. We started going to Jaffrey Bible Church youth group. And that's where we met Peter and Tracy and their family. They made an exception for me, which I always thought was kind of funny because I was 11 years old. 11 years old, and youth group didn't start until 12. So that was a big deal.
So they liked you from the start.
I guess so. Maybe it was just because there was like pre-approved by their niece or something. I don't know. We liked it a lot and we kept on going for a few weeks. And I remember my parents being like, why do you guys like going up there so much? We have to go see what this place is all about. And they were like really concerned about it, which I think was funny. But they went up and they were like instant family with Peter and Tracy, which was always a cool memory to me. Like they would hang out, like they would go to dinner with each other and they would go on motorcycle rides with each other. And I feel like they hung out the same as like Jared and I hung out, or me and Jared's sister were friends. And so we were all just really connected that way, I think, from the very beginning, which is cool.
I love that. And Peter and Tracy, I was just realizing I should clarify, are Jared's mom and dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is your mom and dad and Jared's mom and dad, which is adorable, right. And I had no idea.
And I remember my mom being like, I feel like I've known them forever. They're like best friends. Like right away, they just really instantly connected, which is cool. I always get to this point and think I really don't want to tell my kids this part, but I was 13 years old when I started dating Jared. I'm like, can we just leave that out? Like when we have to tell our kids.
Allie, my son is 13. My daughter is 12. I'm having heart palpitations right now.
Seriously, I look back and I'm like, why? Like, was that okay? I feel like it wasn't. But I guess what can you do, like, dating at 13, 14 years old? Like, you can't really do much. So, like, I remember our first date was that we went to a movie and his mom drove us. And I thought, that's something we laugh about. But I don't know, we grew together that way. When I started my freshman year of high school, though, that's when we sort of kind of went our separate ways. And there was a time where we weren't dating and we, had other acquaintances and stuff like that. But we got back together when I was a junior in high school. And that's when things really got more serious between the two of us. And it's funny because people always are like, how can you date someone who lives, he lived in New Hampshire. We lived half an hour away from each other, but it was like a distance thing. But we did see each other quite a bit.
Which is a big deal when you're in high school, like a half an hour. How do you get to one another?
Right. And I'm sure my parents didn't really like me driving that far, but
I don't know. They let you date at 13. So I'm starting to question.
Or have a boyfriend. Like, I don't know what it was at 13, but we liked each other.
You check the box. I like you. You like me.
That's right. Do you want to see a movie? Check yes or no.
Yes.
But we really did get serious. And I feel like we always talk about the moment we decided to really have a courtship or an actual dating relationship. And like we both really knew that was going to be a forever thing. And so that was something purposeful for us because, you don't just, for us, we didn't just go around dating random people. That wasn't something that we did. We dated with the intention of marriage someday. And I feel like when we got together when we were in high school like that, then I don't know, it was just more meaningful. We just kind of knew that was going to be it. Yeah. So I guess the rest is history.
I love a good, romantic story. I'm not sure how I feel about meeting him at 11, starting at I don't know, for personal parenting reasons, I'm feeling a little stressed out about that.
Yeah, it's stressful. And trust me, like going back to the whole let's omit parts of our story for our kids' sake, I'm terrified. I was 18 when I got married. So we got engaged. I was 17, so I was still in high school. And then I graduated in June, and in July, that's when we got married. So I'm like, Mom, how did you even do that? What were you thinking? You did have a say in this, I think it was the whole, our families were just so well acquainted with each other. We weren't, I don't know, we didn't isolate our parents from each other or anything like that. Or it wasn't it didn't feel random. Everything felt like it fit together pretty perfectly. And I think that's what kind of helped it all be okay when we were so young getting married. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. But we've been married now for 13 years almost.
So you're 20. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right? Let's skip the math part now. But yeah, 13 years. And we have 2 daughters, Ada and Elin, and they're 7 and 8 now. And we still live in New Hampshire. So Jared grew up in Jaffrey, and we still live there, which I think is kind of cool because I feel like we have more of a connection to our community that way. It's cool that they kind of know the Vitello name, and Jared's brother, my sister-in-law, they live in Jaffrey still too. So it's just really cool to have the connections like that, and to, we go to soccer games and people strike up conversation with them, and it's just kind of neat.
I love
that.
And Jaffrey's not a big town. So it's not like you're living in this big city. So you do get to know people for sure.
Yeah.
I love that.
And now that my kids are involved in school and sports and all that, you just feel more at home, I think.
Oh yeah. Tell me, so you and I have the 18 and married in common. Must have been a theme with those Jaffrey Bible boys. Scoop them up while they're young, I guess. I don't know. What for you, and I'm actually, this is kind of a personal question too, because I'm wondering your experience. What were some of the things that were hard and about making the decision to marry that young? Because from my experience anyways, it's not like it never happens. Obviously, you and I are both sitting here and it's happened for us. But it's not very often that I meet people that were married in their late teens or whatnot. What was your experience of that? Because you're not that far. I think would you say 13 years of marriage? So you only married a couple of years after we married. So you're kind of same time frame. Mm-hmm. What was hard, but also what did you feel like? I'm super glad we did it while we're young.
I feel like the hard part was I have a really close family. So I'm very close to my sisters and my brothers and my parents. And I feel like the whole moving away from home thing that young was a real struggle for me, especially the first year of marriage. You're adapting to, you know your spouse, but to live with them is totally different. And so there were some struggles there, I think. And I just remembered having a really hard time being away from my family in the beginning. I think one of the biggest benefits was that we were so young and we were friends first, and we kind of opened up our homes, not just each other, but like I would go over and have family dinner with his family and vice versa. And we would do things as families, not just the two of us, but also with like our parents or our siblings. And I think that is cool to just basically be able to grow up with each other, I think.
Yeah.
And to be friends like that, and then just to be accepted into each other's family that way. From being so young. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible, because not very many people, even though I was married, like we were both married at the same age, Andy and I didn't grow up. I kind of entered the scene, at 16. And it's funny thinking back to meeting you guys, and you all had this like community that had been together for so long, because he went to that same youth group and there was a bunch of kids that were really tight. At the risk of him editing this out, he had dated your sister, which is just now coming back to me. That's hilarious. So you guys were all really tight now that I think about it.
I guess so. That's like a part of it all that I always forget.
I literally just forgot it until I was like, wait a second, it was your sister. Oh, that's so funny. Yep. Yeah, so he's going to kill me for putting this in, but it's too funny not to. Your sister was the girlfriend he had, like the most recent girlfriend before I met him. I'll say it that way. And ironically she was the first person that I got to know at Monadnock, because we like worked together as counselors. And I had no idea that at that point, like I hadn't even noticed Andy as far as like, I thought he was my boss. So there was that, but also I was not there like scouting him out. And so it was just funny that my first interaction with like my future husband was with his ex-girlfriend. Oh, good time. So yeah, Jaffrey's a really close-knit community. Apparently. Oh gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, so I came in, I didn't have that kind of families knowing each other, but what's really funny is I feel like we're getting that a little bit now, because now my parents have moved near us. Andy's parents live in our house, and now our parents are getting to know each other. So hearing you say that, I'm like, it is really nice. Like when families come together, rare, but it's nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
I love it. So talk me through a little bit about what does life look like for you since getting married? Obviously, we know now you have 2 kids, but kind of that journey from getting married young until where you are today.
So actually up until just recently, we have lived still in Jaffrey, but in a different house. We bought Jared's grandparents' house when we decided we were going to buy. That was 10 years ago. And so we knew we wanted to buy a house, start a family, kind of do all of that timeline stuff. You have things prepared or planned. And then Jared, actually, when we were first married, he was working. Was he still working construction? He was. It wasn't until after we bought the house and decided we wanted to have kids. I was pregnant with Ada, where he really stepped into ministry, which has been a huge part of us. It started off as a part-time thing. And then I remember when I was getting ready to have the baby, I was like, okay, we've got to make things a little more solid. Like we need some security. We need to, and God really opened up a door for him to be able to work full-time for our church. And he does the youth program and the worship. And that's what he does. He did 10 years ago. He did that. Since then, the role has moved on to be an associate pastor. So now that is his title now. But I always thought it was funny because I'm like, when I hear the title pastor's wife, I'm like, like that's not me. I don't know. I always think of old ladies. That's probably not fair. I'm like, I don't know.
Allie manages to offend a quarter of our listeners. That's fantastic. I hate to break it to you, kid, but you're a pastor's wife.
That's scary. People gave me books on like what it meant to be a pastor's wife, and I was like, it was always so very scary to me, I think, because you think of those people as being really perfect, right? They're women that everybody else kind of looks up to, and I still don't feel that way. It's just something that we grow with, and we've grown with for the last 10 years, just adapting to whatever God brings us next. It was, here's a part-time job in ministry, and now it's full-time, and now you're an associate pastor. And so we've really grown over the last 10 years doing stuff like that. We're still working with the youth, which is, it's a small group of kids, but it's enjoyable. It's something we really like doing. I work with even smaller kids in junior church, about my kids' ages. And that's always fun because I feel like they teach me more than I teach them. They're very honest, and I like that. So those are some things I enjoy doing in our church. I don't know. And that's kind of what life looks. Obviously, when you're involved in ministry, you're really busy. And so several nights a week, we're out at the church. And if we're not doing church stuff, I'm carting kids around to kids programs, and just life moves along, and you just try and keep up with it.
I think one of the things that really, when I think about you and the journey that you've been on, and this thing that stood out to me that I really was a big part of, I'm like, I really want to interview Allie, because your story to me represents what faithfulness really looks like when you look at something because I just see so much, especially in youth ministry and full-time ministry in general, but this isn't meant to be a bash on them. People come and go and they're led to different things, but it's getting more and more rare that you see people stay with the same church community, and never mind just staying with their community. And so for you to have this story of, this is the town, this is the town my husband's from. Like, we bought his grandfather's house. Like, but you're not like weird towny people. Let's just clarify. You're not. Okay. So now I'm going to dig a hole, but I'm just saying you don't have that look of like, okay, they're just stuck in Jaffrey. Like, I've never had that sense at all. And that's what I feel like people get that rap for. Like, the idea of staying where you're from, it seems foreign. And so one of the things I love about your family and your story and Jared's is you haven't just stayed in Jaffrey, but you have been faithful to continue to follow God's lead, and how that has been this progression, this steady progression of growth. Like, I know Jared as like high school Jared, and we won't, Jared, I'll do you a favor. We won't talk about all the things, but I love where God has brought him, and then you guys together and in your church to go from, just like you said, from part-time, full-time, now associate pastor, in your involvement. I think there are things that God is accomplishing through you because of your faithfulness over time that some people miss out on their entire lives because we never stay put long enough to see the fruit of that kind of investment. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Like, I love that about your story.
Yeah. And it's funny because we've been at our church so long, and I don't think I mentioned it's Good News Bible Church in Wilton. I don't think we said that, but we've been there so long that Jared kind of jokes sometimes it feels like because people move on for whatever reasons, or get called somewhere, or move because of jobs, or what, he's like, I feel like we've had like 5 different churches because, people come and go, but we've been steadfast, and we just, you just go with God's flow. Like, God's going to bring you people, and you minister to them what he has put on your heart, and you minister to their kids, and you have programs so that everyone's fed spiritually. And I feel like you're right. Staying in one place for a long time, you see a lot, and you serve a lot, but it's worth it. You learn a lot.
Yeah. Maybe for those, I'm thinking about people listening now that whether that's completely foreign or maybe they're feeling really called to that, like I really think God is going to have me here for a long time, or maybe they have similar stories where they're like, no, I have been here for a long time, but maybe they're in a place of discouragement. And I can think of a friend right now that's kind of they're in that, there's ebbs and flows, and they're kind of in that place of feeling discouraged and like, okay, do we stick it out again? Or because like you said, with every change, sometimes it has that feeling of, I got to start all over again. Like we've invested in these people and now they're moving on. And now do I have it in me to do this again? Do you have any words of encouragement, things that God has spoken to you over these years that have kind of been an encouragement to your heart as you've journeyed through that?
Yes, so much. I think one of the biggest things is just to listen, whether it's to each other as spouses or listening to your friends, but more importantly, listening to God, because obviously He knows best. But I think we do a lot of talking, and to just listen and say, okay, God, what do you have for us? Like, obviously we can be discouraged and we can be hurt. Do we stay and serve faithfully, or do we try and find something else? And then just be ready for an answer. God's faithful in answering. And unfortunately, when we are in a place for a very long time, things come up. We do get hurt. People can leave. Ministries can fail. Like, there's so many things that can happen, but God is faithful. And I think He deserves our faithfulness too. Listening is a big thing. We do a lot of talking to God, talking at God. And I think we just need to just pay attention sometimes and open our hearts to where He really wants us, what He's trying to say to us.
I love that. Let's just close in prayer. Let's just go on that note. I love that. And that's definitely been a theme of things that God's been speaking a lot to me in my current transition, is the idea of quieting things and listening. And I love when that becomes a theme as I interview people and hear stories, and I'm like, oh, so this is like a thing. Like, not just like a me thing, but like we always call them when my kids were little, I used to say it a lot. If I was correcting something that was in the moment, but really applied to like a bigger picture, I would always be like, okay, life lesson moment. Like, basically, this is not just this moment. Like, this is something you need to take with you because it matters down the line. So the whole listening life lesson, this is not just transition or where, your season of life or my season of life, but all across the board. This is definitely something that God has been stirring, is we need to quiet our hearts before Him and listen. And I would even add, you said it really wisely, be ready for an answer and be ready to obey. Because the other side I see a lot is, I want to listen to God until He tells me the thing I want to do. Like, I've been listening and God's been speaking, but it's not the thing they wanted to hear. So we just keep listening and like, I'll wait for the next thing. It's like we're waiting for a train to take it. I'll wait for the next train.
Or I have a very strong personality where if I just know what's best, I'm just going to do it myself. If I can control things, I'm just going to do it on my own. And that's part of it too, is that we really should give all the control to God, because He's going to control it anyway, right? I mean, not being so controlling over your own situations and really giving that up. That's hard, especially for me, because I'm like, have a schedule for everything. I have to tell you the story. I dropped my phone, actually, leaving Simply Beautiful. I dropped my phone in the toilet.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it never worked again. But the thing I was mortified of losing was my calendar. So that just proves a point, I guess, like the whole control thing. But anyway.
That's very insightful.
But just having everything like planned, and I'm a planner, and having everything scheduled and organized, and when something messes that all up, it's hard to stay focused. I would definitely say that giving up control is a big thing too. So listening and giving up control, those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
I love it. So then tell me, since you love to schedule things, what is your current schedule looking like? What is this season of life, your kind of day-to-day look like for you?
I have 2 days open, Monday and Wednesday.
I'm glad I could schedule in your window.
But really, I should start a little story here because I feel like it kind of leads up to today. So for 10 years, I told you we had owned a house, and we became really frustrated with just living there. And it was like discontentment a little bit, I think, but it was a large house and a large piece of property. So it took a lot of our time and it took a lot of our finances. And Jared and I, for a few years, were like, we really want to try and sell this house. But I think the more important thing was like, why? Why are we just going to be like, oh, we want to get rid of this place? But our biggest thing was time. And time is like, it's important and it's fleeting. I mean, it just goes away so quickly. And we felt like all of our time was wrapped up in making sure the house, things around the house were fixed, or the lawn was done, or, the apartment was, nothing was wrong with the apartment and things like that. And so one of our biggest things was like, we wanted to downsize so that we could have more time to ourselves or for our kids or for, any other thing that might come up ministry wise, or if we're selfish for ourselves, we just needed more time to do things. And so that's why we sold our house. We put our house on the market. And we had tried to in the past sell, but the market was really terrible. So we were a little discouraged and a little hesitant, and we're like, oh, it's probably not going to sell again. And we put it on the market and we had a full offer in 8 days. Wow. So we were like, oh, what are we doing now then? So that was a little crazy last summer, but we've been living in our new place for, is it 6 months now? I think it's 6 months. And it's like one of the best decisions we've literally ever made. It did exactly what we needed it to do. We have time to spend with our kids in the evenings and weekends, and time to travel and things that we've been wanting to do for a really long time. So right now, it is a little freeing as far as our schedules. We have our weekly activities, but at least we have weekends to be able to be with family. That's a huge thing to us. We either get together with my family for dinner or go over to Jared's house, family's house for dinner. And we really make it a point to be with our family because we need each other. And I always hated giving up that time when we didn't really have it. That's kind of what life looks like right now for us. Not too busy anymore, which is great. And just spending a lot of time with family.
I think that's awesome. The downsizing and simplifying life a little bit.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing. So tell me, that's obviously something to celebrate is extra. Now you have more time to spend with your kids. In the season with downsizing, with the kids at the age they are, work, ministry, what is something that you find challenging about this season?
Adjustment, surprisingly enough. This is one thing I thought about when we were discussing the questions, and it really was an adjustment. You knew my house before, but it was set back in its own area, and we didn't have to see people. I hope none of my neighbors listen to this.
I'm going to advertise it to him now.
The community we live in now, it's a cul-de-sac, so it's a neighborhood. So our neighbors are like 30 feet that way, 30 feet this way. Like we're in a little cul-de-sac, which has really great benefits. And it started as a 55 plus community, but then the homes weren't selling when they were building them, so they opened it up to anybody. Needless to say, it's a quiet community, but there are a lot of older people who live in the neighborhood. But it was an adjustment for us because our kids, they felt like limited to, just our tiny little lot or our house, and they felt like they couldn't go certain places or do certain things, and which isn't the case, but it took adjusting to. So I think right now that's kind of the theme in life is adjustment. It took a little bit for the first 6 months now, and it's been good for us in a lot of ways, but being able to just go with the flow is a huge adjustment.
Did you ever watch the show Friends when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever I think about adjustment or transition or whatever, the scene of moving that couch up the stairs and he's like, pivot! Pivot! That's my, in moments where, you're having to make adjustments is because I just need laughter in my life on a regular basis. That's my sanity. And so that scene is a lifesaver for me in moments where, okay, I thought I'm going this way, but I really need to shift is just that voice in my head. Pivot. So
that's funny.
You're welcome. Always here to help. Oh, so tell me, Allie, your relationship with Jesus right now, what does it look like just growing closer to him, the time you spend with him?
I think the most time I spend right now with him would probably be and my favorite times right now is in worship. I feel connected that I've always been musical. I've always been into music. And same with Jared, obviously. He does worship. But I feel like those are the times I'm closest to him right now, is when we can be connected through music, but not just the music, it's the words that we're saying.
Oh, yeah.
And you can just kind of be in your own little atmosphere when you worship. And I don't know, I think that's right now is how I am growing closer with Jesus or to Jesus.
Do you have any favorite jams right now?
I don't know. I can't remember. This is the problem with me. Jared knows a bazillion songs. Well, right? This worship leaders do.
Yes.
This. They know a billion songs, and then I'm the one who goes, "Oh, can we do that song this week?" And he's like, "What one?" And then I sing a line, and he's like, "That's every worship song." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
The one about Jesus and the grace and there's flowing. Something's flowing.
The one that talks about God's love. Do you remember that one?
And it's like a wind. No, it's like a hurricane. No, wait, maybe earthquake. I don't know.
The lighthouse. I don't know.
These are worship leaders' wives talking to their husbands. They love us. They love us. Oh.
My requests always get put on the back burner, though. So, I'm like, I heard this great song. You should really learn this one. And then it never gets done. And I always harass him about that. It's funny.
Well, it's like when your spouse is a massage therapist and you never get a massage. I guess it works the same in ministry. Oh, man, I love it. Well, I'll give you, in case this is not already on your list, Do It Again, the song. Is it Elevation, I think, that has it? Girl, if you don't have that on repeat, you need to go find that, now. Because
I will. I'll have to go.
Oh goodness. It's like the faithfulness, but then the mountains moving, it's got all the things. Oh, well, Allie, this has been wonderful. And I could ask a million more questions, but I do have one more really super important question for you. She's already laughing. Clearly you listen to this show. Allie, what is the most superficial thing about you?
Superficial. Like, random thing about me. Or
kind of random. I always say the thing that has like no eternal significance or value. Obviously you have value, but like sometimes it's clothing, shoes. Some women, they're like the tanning or the face creams or the hair or the plates. I don't know. Should we bring Jared in and ask him?
Ask him what the most superficial thing about me is. I'll ask him. Hold on. We have a question for you. What's the most superficial thing about me?
Choose your words wisely.
Oh, he says my connection to Netflix.
Yes. Does that mean you're a Netflix binger?
I do. And I've gotten him on board on watching like this Netflix original series about like, it's like a big love story on Jeanette Oki books, and he's way into it. So he can't deny that.
Okay, wait, what's the name of it?
When Calls the Heart. It's so good.
I love it so much. Andy would never. I couldn't get him into that one. I could try. Do you have any other favorites?
I love Life in Pieces.
What is that one?
Life in Pieces. It was when my parents were like, you have to watch this show. It's hilarious, but it's about a really close family. I haven't watched the rest of them because I don't have cable, so I apologize for recommending anything that might not be appropriate now. It was back when I was watching it, but
it was back when I started.
Back when I started binge watching Netflix.
Do you watch This Is Us?
I do. That was going to be my next one. I love that show. It makes me cry.
Oh,
Jared won't watch that one with me though.
Really?
It disappoints me. Yeah, but he'll watch When Calls the Heart.
That shocks me. Actually,
I know.
I would think This Is Us would draw him in more, but
no, I just have to get him to watch the first 2 This Is Us episodes, and then and then he'll watch the rest.
Absolutely. Then he's in. I love it. Well, this has been wonderful. I have 2 full pages of notes. So
oh my gosh.
Thank you for changing my life forever, Allie. But thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, and blessing our listeners. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for asking me. It was fun. Thank you.
Okay, listeners, that was Allie. I absolutely loved listening to the story of her faithfulness over so many years of staying where God had planted her. And Laurie, I don't know about you, but I feel like I know less and less of people's stories that's where they're at. And like a lot of people that get called to the mission field or go here or go there or constant transition. I feel like I'm describing my life right now. But less do you hear of people who stay put in one ministry or one house or whatever it is for long at all. It's almost like it's gotten like a negative, I'm going to mess up this word.
Connotation?
That's what I was going to say.
Like the Canadian. You're like, connotation.
It was. I was going to say it Canadian. It does. It has this negative connotation of like, if we stay put, then we're stagnant.
We're not moving forward.
Yeah. And I just love that Allie brought this story forward to remind us that staying put does not always mean stagnant.
Absolutely.
That when God calls you to a place and his call on your life is to stay and to remain and to be faithful, the life that is in that and the growth. And she talked even in that conversation that just because she stayed put did not mean that everything in their lives stayed the same.
Yeah, she mentioned that they felt like they almost had 5 different churches. And it's funny, you actually have an anchor behind you as we're recording now, and I'm thinking she's that anchor in that town, her and her husband, of having that church. And as people come and go, they get to experience it, and either it's a season or they might end up, staying there for a long time.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like with anyone, no matter what your calling is, I'm sure they've probably had moments where they're like, yeah, we would have left if we could. Like, I feel like that is real life. There's moments where I'm sure even that remaining faithful. But I also think now, as they stand where they are for as many years as they've been there, that they're getting to live a part of ministry that so few people, especially their age, get to experience. And because the only way to experience that depth of ministry is to stick with it for that long. And we just talked earlier, we were doing a recording earlier about this idea of process and like staying in the process. And for them to stick with something for that long in their community and the relationships that they build, I just think, man, the depth of their relationships that they have now, but also the ways that they've gotten to see God's faithfulness show up. Like she mentioned, it's like 5 different churches, but to be in the same church and see God show up again and again and again and again, and not because they changed everything or a new building or knew this or knew that, but it was that God was faithful. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. To me, there's something that almost like stirs in me when I hear this story, because I'm like, yes, like maybe it's my age and I'm starting to settle down more, but there is a part of me that wearies of the next shiny toy.
Right.
And longs for that, just the roots that really grow in the depth of the soil when it's given the time and the commitment and the faithfulness to really flourish and grow.
I think our society has this change is good, and that is true, but change doesn't always have to be from us. We can stay where we are and God will bring the change.
Yeah.
You said earlier that staying doesn't mean it's stale. It can be still fresh every day. It's really according to God's plan.
Yeah. Absolutely. I really appreciated that portion of their story and how that applies. I know she didn't mention it in this interview, but just knowing her personally and knowing that this is applied to her place of work that she stayed at for all these years, for the church that they're in, for the community that they've lived in. Yeah. I love it. And I'm excited to continue to watch what God has in store. And it's not like there's this either or. Like God could totally tomorrow call them out of Jaffrey, like out of that area to a totally different area. And that would not be like, well, you blew it.
Well, Ali said she's going to be listening and on the, hunt for God's next plan for them. And the big thing is not just to listen and say, okay, that would be a good idea, but to obey.
Yeah. And that was my other favorite thing when she talked about, what advice would she give? And that advice of listen. And you want to talk about something that is incredibly countercultural, is this idea of listening to learn versus listening to respond. And I am positive we've talked about this before because this comes up a lot, but this idea of actually taking time to listen to someone without like biting the bullet to like, oh, I can't wait to say something back to that, but really like hearing what they're saying and learning from it and growing from that.
It reminds me of when you meet someone for the first time and you're like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and they say who they are, and then you don't even remember their name because you were just like, okay, what am I going to say after my name? Yes. And then you're like, oh, how do I find out their name again? Like, should I ask them? Oh, how do you spell that? They're like, John.
Yes.
Yep.
My husband told me about this. It was like a group thing that he did, and they went around the circle and they had everybody introduce themselves. And then you had to go around and remember everyone's name. And if you didn't remember their name, you had to tell them, I didn't care enough about you to remember your name. But it wasn't meant as, it was more like you acknowledging the fact that, okay, you didn't take the time. And it wasn't like an obnoxious amount of people to remember, but it kind of was like this enlightening moment of how often we do that, where we're just in our own heads and we didn't even hear half the stuff the other person said. but taking the time to really listen.
Or listen versus hearing. A lot of people talk about that, like not just letting those words flow through your mind, but to actually savor them and soak them in.
It's true. And I love she gave the 3, obviously listening to God, but also listening to your friends and those people that speak wisdom or love or even rebuke sometimes. Those people that are in that place in your life where they can call you out on stuff, and taking time to actually hear them, to listen and hear them. And then she said also your spouse, like if you're married or your significant other, are we taking time to actually listen? And I would add to that with your spouse is your kids. And I say this is like a total zinger to me, but like it's hard sometimes with your kids because you have so many things you want to say to them, but then actually taking time to listen to them, because sometimes I feel like, okay, there's 90% of weeds in what you're saying and then like 10% of the good stuff.
Dandelions.
Yes. And taking time to listen to them and know that when they're talking to you, like, this is what matters. It may not be the conversation you planned or want to have in that moment, but this is what's on their heart. And really practicing being a good listener and learner, I think, is a big deal.
What's hard for me with that third pillar of listening to your spouse or significant other is my husband is not a man of many words. And so I'll be like, how are you feeling? And actually we joke at life group because every time we have this life group, we go around and say, how's everyone doing? And people share some intimate stories. And every time my husband's like, well, things are good. It doesn't matter if like things are great or mediocre. He's just very steady. And so I want to listen to him, but sometimes it's hard to like pull it out. And I'm so impatient too that I'm like, okay, I paused 5 seconds. He didn't say anything. I'm going to fill the void. And so listening is like an art, and I need to work out that muscle.
You just reminded me though, and I'm trying to think of where I read this, but this idea of we don't just listen with our ears, this idea of listening with our whole being, because there are people who communicate without their words. They communicate in body language, they communicate in their actions, whatever it is. And being tuned in and aware of other people in a way that we're listening when they're talking and maybe listening when they're not talking. Because I would say I have 2 kids that are on opposite ends of the spectrum on which one uses words and which one I feel like I'm just reading between the lines, or I'm reading their body language and I'm like, okay, because sometimes they'll say something that their body language is not aligning with. And for me to be in tune to that, to say, okay, you're saying you're okay, but let me just tell you, like, this is what I'm experiencing is like, you seem upset. Which if you're not, that's fine. I could totally be reading it wrong, but not just taking their pat answer and walking away and be like, okay, they said they're fine. Mm-hmm. Like, is actually, no, but I actually want to hear how you're doing. Mm-hmm. I have one kid, I'm not going to like name which kid is which, but I have one kid in particular that most times, I want to say 95% of the time when they're upset, the conversation will begin with me saying, are you okay? And them saying, yeah, I'm fine. And never are they going to like okay, the other 5%, maybe they'll offer up that they're upset, but it is me like actually being tuned into, okay, but you don't seem, and it's not being like hover parent, like just annoying them, but like, I mean, legitimately their body language, or they're flat out crying. And I'm like, okay, well, if you are okay, then why are you going through a box of tissues right now, like crying on the couch? So I just gave away that it was my daughter. Oh! Just kidding. It's my son. But listening with more than just like what people say, but also, because I think that with God, sometimes...
Well, exactly. Yeah, God's not a lot of times going to be calling you on the phone, giving you clear direction. So how do we listen, like, to the events that are happening in our life? Like, was that snowstorm? We just actually recently had a snowstorm here in New England, and we lost power, and people couldn't go to school and work, and you can just be like, oh, that was a coincidence that my meeting got canceled. Or, is it God slightly nudging you a different way, and being in tune to all those nonverbal cues.
Very true. And
I just crave words all the time.
I know. We need words. That's why we do a podcast.
Yeah.
We need so many words. I love this interview, like any other interview, but I would say walking away from this, and Allie, I'm so grateful you're willing to come on, but I walked away, one, just being so encouraged and reminded about the importance of faithfulness and faithfulness to what God has called you to do, and not feeling like if I'm doing the same thing for this set of time, that means that I'm stagnant or that I become stale, but that there is a faithfulness of God saying, just wait, like stay put. I'm still at work here. And allowing God to do new things in same places. I just feel like it just resonated for me in the season. And then the second one was just the listening. Is God, help me to be someone who's listening to you, even when you're not necessarily outright speaking, even when I don't have my nose in the Bible or I'm not in church, but I'm just out and about, to just listen to you. And for me, practically speaking, that's when I'm at the gym and someone engages in a conversation and they're asking me about things that open the door for me to share about. Help me be listening to that and not be in such a hurry and so busy and doing all these things that I miss things that you're like, hello, like this is me, like pay attention. So those are definitely my two takeaways. Anything else from you before we wrap it up today?
I think in terms of the listening, just the obeying too. So it's not enough just to say, okay, I hear you, but having that strength to continue to obey, to continue to see things through. Allie, it's crazy that you met your husband at 13, married at 18, been in the same job, but you just continue to have new seasons and new inspiration. So thank you so much for being on the show.
And as always, listeners, we want to encourage you, whether you've been in this same race for however many years or you feel like you're at the starting line, wherever you're at in this race, just to run your race in your place, keep being awesome for Jesus. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.